Hey guys, it's Joe, and this video is going to be an in-depth look at Delay Designer. Now, Delay Designer is a relatively complex delay plugin, but there are a lot of possibilities to use it for, and it's really quite good for a stock plugin. So I'll just be demonstrating what it does on a simple synth stab, and then show you how to properly use it for a melody to make things sound really wide. So without the delay, this is the stab. Pretty straightforward. So when you've actually opened up Delay Designer, you'll be met with a relatively bare window here. Now, as you can see, we've just got this one line, and these lines are essentially delays. There'll be extra hits that come through after the initial signal. So if I just hit play, you'll hear this has come through again. Now you can draw more of these in along the line at the bottom here, so you just have these faint lines that you can just press on and it will create new delays. Like so. Now you may have noticed that all of those were the same volume, and that's because at the moment we're on the level window, and we have 5 windows. We have the level, the pan, the transpose, resonance and cutoff. So level is essentially how loud each delay is going to be. So typical delay or echo, it will get quieter as it goes on. So by simply clicking and dragging down on each of these, you can make it quieter as it goes on to create a quite a typical delay sound. Which is pretty straightforward. You can of course make it go louder, because we've got this faint blue line here, and that's essentially the volume of the original signal, and anything above or the same as that will be the same volume or above it. So you can hear that third hit coming through is above this. So you have the initial hit here, first one, then this, which is louder. But of course we're just going to drop this down because we just want a typical delay sound. So next we have pan, and here we can actually pan each delay to the left or to the right or somewhere in between. So just by clicking and dragging up, drag it up to the left, down to the right, we can just alternate the panning on each of these sounds. Now you may still notice we've got these green and blue lines here, and when these are set like this, they're set on 100%, that essentially means it's got quite a wide spread. So even though we've panned it all the way to the left, it's still covering the whole of the left. None of the right, but it's still covering all of that. Whereas if we click and drag it up, it will now just be really hard panned. So if we do it on all of them, it'll essentially create something like a ping pong effect, where it'll really be going back and forth. So it's a lot clearer about the panning. I like to have a little bit of space on it, so even just keeping it at 60 or 70 is quite good, I find, but obviously it's completely up to you. It's worth playing around with. Next we have transpose, and this actually changes the pitch of each delay. So if you're using it for a single stab, you can get some cool results, because you can essentially make an arpeggiator, because you've just got one sound. It won't have to harmonize with anything else. Like that. Whereas if you have a more complex melody, you won't be able to do that, because everything in it, you get a major third delay coming off every single note, which could sound horrendous. So you make the changes in semitones, so you can either increase or decrease it in semitones up to a maximum of 12. So we're just going to actually reset these. So if we just hold Alt and click on them, it drops them back down to 0. So we're going to leave it on 12 semitones or an octave for the last one to get a really nice high ping at the end. And then lastly we have the cutoff and resonance. So these are really cool, because with the cutoff we can essentially choose what frequencies are actually getting delayed. So at the top we've got 22,000 Hertz, so just covering a little bit extra, and at the bottom 0 Hertz, so again just a little bit above and below actual human hearing range, which is 20 to 20,000. So if we drop this, drop some of the low end off, we won't be hearing anything coming through below 400 Hertz now. And then likewise at the top, won't hear anything above 4,000 Hertz. So that's quite a narrow field. So let's make it a bit wider. In fact, let's just say we'll alternate. We'll just come through with some high end, then some low, and some high, and then finish normally. So you can hear the first hit, our normal hit, completely normal, and then after that it starts to change a bit. In fact, I'll just do the same thing here, see how that sounds. So we're getting rid of some of those frequencies, and then you can use the resonance to kind of play with that a little bit to actually increase essentially increase the volume of frequencies either side of our cutoffs. So let's just select all of these. If you hold shift and click on all of them, you can change them all equally, like so. So let's just hit play and see how it sounds. So that's quite extreme, but I quite like it. I might just drop it down a little bit. So already we've actually created quite an interesting sound. It's maybe not something you would potentially use, but it still develops an understanding of how to actually use it. So those are the main parameters, but we also have some more to the side down here. So we have sync, which actually syncs it to the tempo of whatever your project is set to. But if we turn that off, then it's free time, so in milliseconds. When you're doing music, I can't really ever think of a time when I wouldn't use sync. If you're doing like film score or sound design, things like that, sure. But for music and actually writing songs, then I tend to leave sync on. And then you can also change the grid. So at the moment we're on 16th notes, but if we change it to 32, you'll see that more lines have appeared down here for more options for us to actually draw in. I don't really feel the need to go higher than 16, especially when working in this kind of tempo. If I'm working at like 70, maybe even 80 BPM, then yeah. But for this kind of speed, don't really feel the need. And then we have swing, which will surprisingly give the delay a bit of a swing feel when we change it. So if I just move it up, you can see our D over here is moving with it. So I just put that on 66. It gives it a bit of a swing feel depending on what other notes you have in there. So if I were to have another one here, perhaps. It's going to be really loud. Yeah, okay. So it just gives it that bit of swing. Again, this depends on what pattern you actually already have in there. So for this one, it doesn't really work. So I just leave it on 50. But depending on what you're going for, it can be really useful. Next, we have this area, which is really quite cool actually. So here you can actually tap in your pattern. So if you just click start and then just tap in whatever you want your pattern to be, and then click last tap, it'll put it in. Because you have to click last tap, it still inputs that, so you just have to select it, get rid of it, and you're sorted really. It's too short. So really cool for making your own patterns. And then because you've essentially put in a new pattern, you have to go through and adjust all the different areas again. And over here we have a feedback option. So again, really cool. Might just delete a few of these points actually, just otherwise it will take forever. So just turn on the feedback and you'll hear what it does. So you can hear it's playing this over and over again, it's feeding it back, getting quieter and quieter every time. And you can change how much it gets quieter by adjusting this here. So if I drop that down to say -8, yeah, that'll do. Here it got quieter much quicker. You can also make it get louder, which is a bit bizarre. I can't think of a time where I'd ever use that, but it's there, so if you want to use it, go for it. But I find that just around -15 to -25, depending on what you've got, works really nicely. And then lastly in the feedback, we have this option here. So we can choose what will actually be used in the feedback. So we've got all our different taps, and all the taps have different letters here. So it's going from the last one, so it's using the feedback on all of it. Whereas even if I just select tap B, you can see this red line up here has changed. So it will just feed back the first two delays. And then it gets very quiet very quickly. And then one of the last parts is this mix. Pretty standard on most plugins, a dry wet mix. So if we have the wet quieter, then all the delays will be quieter straight away. And similarly for the dry, our initial hit could be quieter as well. So we could even have the dry quieter than the wet. So our first hit is quieter and then all the delays are louder. So you can hear it jumping out very quickly. Cool. Then lastly, all of the different areas, we have different buttons, or these buttons at the top of each of the delays. So on the level, it simply mutes it, it will turn it off. So when it's filled in, it's off. When it's empty, it's on. On the pan, it flips it between left and right. So if it's filled in, left becomes right, etc. So on and so on. Transpose just means it's on or not. So pretty straightforward. Resonance is the slope. So when it's off, it's a 6 dB slope, and when it's on, it's a 12. So it's a bit more aggressive. And then cut off again is just whether or not the filter is on. So nice and straightforward. Cool, so now we know what everything does. How do we actually use it in practice? I've just got this, just this standard melody here. Again, same sound, but we're going to put some delay on it to make it sound nice and big, nice and wide. So here's what it sounds like normally. So quite cool, but we need it to sound bigger. So let's open up our delay. We'll just recall the default and play around with it from there. So let's put one in here. And here. So if we just have a listen to it now, haven't changed anything, we've just put in a couple of extra hits. Oh, turn it on maybe. Okay, so it sounds far too busy, really hectic. All the delay signals coming through are as loud as the actual hits, so it just sounds manic. So first of all, we'll just drop it down like a standard delay. Just going to drop it down by about 5 per hit. Now have a listen. So much more tame, much more under control, but still sounds nice and wide. So next we're going to jump into pan and we're going to alternate it. So we're just going to have it going left, right, and then left again. And we're just going to reduce these a little bit, just to about 70, 75, to pan them either side, but not too drastically. So by doing that, we've taken away a lot of the focus from the center, from the delays, where the actual main sound is coming from, and then putting it into the left or the right, which keeps a lot of space free in the center. Next we have transpose, and again, as I mentioned, when you actually have a melody, if you're doing, say, major thirds, I'll show you in fact, I'll just do what I did before. I'm going to put a major third, then a fifth, and then just an octave. Okay, that's not going to work. So for this, I think I might just leave the octave in at the end, for similar to what we had before, just that nice high ping right at the end. Okay, so it's relatively hard to hear, but we're going to address that in a minute. But you can still kind of hear it every now and again, and I think it's quite nice. So we're going to mess around with the cutoff and the resonance now. So I just want the high end to come through on all the delays. I like to leave lots of room from my low end, so this kind of helps with that. So I'm just, first was about 450, 1000, and then last one 1400, 1500. So it's cleared up a lot of that space. In fact, if anything, it might be a bit high. Let's just drop that bit down again. I think that's a bit better. And now we can mess around with the resonance. So as I said, the last one is a little bit hard to hear, our high ping. So we're going to bring that one up quite a lot. And then we'll have the other two up, just not quite as much. Maybe about 30. Okay, so that octave is a lot easier to hear, if anything a bit too obvious. So I'm going to drop it down. Cool, so I think that's actually quite nice. I like where this is at the moment. I may tweak it a little bit more. I don't think I want any feedback on it or swing or anything like that, so I can leave those as they are. I might change the resonance on these two to a 12 dB and leave this one as a 6. It's not too noticeable, but it's still there. And I think that's quite a good end result. So that is how to use Delay Designer. There's quite a lot going on, but they all work in relatively simple ways. And certainly once you understand how to use it, then you can apply it to all the different areas. So once you've got the grasp, you should be able to apply it. So I hope you found this video useful. If you have any questions, please leave a comment or contact me via my website. Thanks a lot for watching. Cheers.